I know you're tired, so relax. I will have a soft talk and fast. I'm going to perform a trans or cross-ecological movement. And for all sorts of reasons, I think that's a kind of a thinking that is interesting and necessary to have this cross-ecological thinking or modus. I'm also going from like 3 or 4, maybe it's more than 3 ecologies, because I like them and I care for these ecologies, okay? There's no other reason, basically. And I do this kind of movement because we can't keep clean. Nobody has kept clean any time in the history, anywhere. And I love to talk about clean and dirt, which I've also brought today also, but maybe another time. And if we can say anything about the world, is that it's dirty and it's excessive and it's lunatic. It's literally made of the lunar forces, the stuff of the moon, that kind of pulling the tide of life from the oceanic depth to the surface to the air. That's and also responsible in some other field of knowledge, responsible for the unregulated violence, which it's a topic of today. And so, are we going from unregulated violence to the regulated one, which is the monopoly of the state? We don't know. And I hope we kept that unknown. And we don't hurry up to produce the master of justice. And don't let this character, this figure, to go forward unnamed, supposedly free from the violence. I would love to also at the time talk about violence some other time. It's a very long story. And who wants to regulate what, with which kind of apparatuses. So it's a tech interface, Amazon, Div literature kind of talk. And Div is a very peculiar character from the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, who wrote this monumental epic for himself to perform another kind of bodybuilding to revive some sort of Iranian identity, but that's another story. So the Div is kind of this metamorphosical sentient master in unsympathetic magic, which is an expert in the crafts of necromancy. You know, that's kind of being that works with form, apparitions, spirits, and dead bodies. Okay, so we are dealing with kind of a skill, with set of skills that are not on the side of life. Okay, the Div is on the side of death, technology, and destruction. Okay, so this is kind of a entity that Rostam, the hero of the story, is going to kill. He's a hitman. He's hired by the king to do a kill job, and so he's too fast to kill, and nothing will stop him. There is no argument for him. There is no discussion. He's going to kill the Div. But he gets tired at some point in the story, and he sleeps on a beautiful piece of old stone from the Sistan, and the Div comes, holds the stone up and carries with Rostam, and asks him, "Do you want me to throw you in the mountains or the sea?" Okay. What happens next? It's not important. I'm interested in the sandwich of the rock, Rostam, and the Div. And why I'm interested in this assemblage? Because assemblages compromises us into desiring them. So, of course, in the Ferdowsi contest-oriented poetic site, the Div is disarticulated in order to articulate a kind of a middle-aged Persian body, but still he lets go of some sort of hint into desiring this beast or this Div that I'm talking about. Ferdowsi, the author of this very long narrative, is also obsessed with some sort of transcendence, because he believed that the outcome of the scene of contest, the agon, is the truth. Okay, he sees the world as a contest with a necessary outcome, and usually the one who is defeated is categorically the Div. Okay, the defeated one, the dead, the killable, which is the Div in this sense, and it's also dishonored. But there are other twists inside the story. But within this kind of seeing the world as a conflictual zone with a necessary outcome, there's also something I want to bring it back to kind of a telos or the seal or the direction of the word of this conflictual or conflicted zone that I'm also using for my own literally movement, because I also believe that we're living in a conflicted world. But I'm also I want to be also very careful with how or where do I import the concept of the conflict, or if the Greeks who coined the term conflict already inserted inside it a desire for some sort of logos or a kind of a negotiative outcome from a chaotic world, which is also, I would say also in this case, the conflict within itself is also demands a consensus, some sort of people reasoning with another kind of a rational enterprise of politics is promised whenever we use this word in some sort of language. So I'm also asking myself, is this a political language? That means this is an operative language. I do things with it. No, it's not going to ask yourself, what do I mean? How my boundaries are generated? But it's to get some work done. Okay, so this is also very interesting. This kind of a language that it acts on its object to the extent that it's transformative. It's very powerful, but also tricky. Okay, so whenever I'm talking about nature, is also, or I'm using certain kind of set of tools, semiotic tools that brings it to some sort of a structured consciousness that allows it to be changed and transformed with my tool of calling it a name. So why am I saying that? Because I studied in KHM, and also people are obsessed with mediation and the structure of significance, and asking again and again and again, who wants to overcome the internal opacities of mediation? Because we are living in a mediated world, and through this, and ethics and politics of responsibility is also created. Which is a fable, which I will talk about it very soon, but it's a very important and necessary one. So it's about composition and decomposing certain epistemological objects that we are working with, that we're using to get some political work done, and then decomposing it afterwards. I'm interested in the afterwards, as you can see. So through this mediation, I'm also bringing my kind of experience and story and travel mode and a very long-term engagement with sweating in the Amazonian area in the south of Colombia, which for me became an excuse to learn and to study the fold and the interface that we are inhabiting with our technologies of constructed eyes, that we're constantly building worlds for us. So I was very curious of how my eyes are constructed in that certain kind of travel, because I had a laptop, a computer, a glitchy eye in one hand, and also I had the 3-year-old Hano with my other hand, and with Karen we were also traveling in this family mode, and I ended up with learning a refractive critical engagement with the politics of closure. You know, this is all about, we're talking today is about closure and the politics of it. Who is allowed to come close to what and how, especially in a kind of in a knowledge field that responsibility, justice, and storytelling are hanging around as keywords. I was also working, learning, teaching myself about visualizing technologies, which is super important in whatever field you're working, whether you're in your science or politics. Okay, so it's also the entanglement of the phenomenon and the apparatuses of its description that we are constantly into, and we are using them. And I also tried, as an, I don't know how, and kind of a field work, like ecological field work, if I can call it. But I'm not that kind of practitioner, so it was very, when I also call it, I did a field work in that sense. I'm also very surprised, and it's kind of excites me that to become that kind of researcher in that sense. So why use that kind of the Kinect as a as a kind of almost destroyed gaze to kind of to think about the possibility of a reciprocal and adjustable encounter with technologies of positioning, in this case, brought me to a lot of stories of transposition and how and when universal means of communication is installed, whether it's a National Geographic story or David Attenborough or all sorts of people who tell stories, okay? And I would say we need it. We need this kind of transpositions of universality to locality and to get out of one to the other, because we need that kind of species consciousness allowness to happen, because we are constantly dealing with creatures, with species, dead or alive, that need to and want to live among us. And so through this, go back to a little bit to the telos of the conscience, which I call it, and to the fable of responsibility, which is the desire and concern of a lot of fables. By the way, this is a fable, okay? If you're wondering, and I love animals, and I'm working with narrative animals and animal subjectivity, and this is exactly, I love this. This is what I'm talking about. You know that is also here we see the wolf and the lamb probably, or the sheep, looking at you. And so there's another character in this fable that distinguishes between wolf and the sheep, and this is you. And be careful about this. Do you want to be that kind of figure that distinguishes between kin and pest? So this is all about how do we relate to the parasite, and when and how the wolves are loose into the tracks of speech, and what would mean for the German Shepherd to lose track of its sheepfold. What would that mean? We don't know. But it's called the fable of the oriented sheepfold. I'm just fancifully calling this. It's brilliant. I don't know what Olivier wanted to really establish here or suggest, but I like the idea of saying that you decide for your identification and mode of responsibility in this case. But it's a binary language. Okay, so we can read this image forever, and still things to say about that. Is the forest made of only these two animals? Also, I have that question. Anyway, but this is the Aesop kind of reading of that there is something hidden inside under the skin or the clothing, but also La Fontaine that suggests that Michel Serres reads it beautifully, that there is a upstream, there's a upstream and downstream, and okay, doesn't matter, but the wolf is drinking from upstream, but the lamb from the down, and says to the lamb that you're mudding my water. And the lamb says, it's impossible, the water is coming down, how can I? The lamb says, no, you annoy me, your dogs, your shepherd have been insulting me, you know what? It doesn't matter, no? You're done, I'm gonna, we have a problem here. And the lamb trying to negotiate doesn't work. And I love how the story ends. They take a walk in the jungle, you know? And we all know how it ends. But I love the surprise of the story that we are not faced with who's eating what, but the wolf says, let's take a walk, and we know it's another kind of walk. Anyway, so thanks very much. Let's call it, let's keep it clean. And if you're interested in what I said or how I said it, come to me and let's talk afterward. Thank you.